Hi, this is Exercise, a show where I take a look at some Gunpla and see how authentic they are. This time, we are looking at the HGUC 12144 RMS-117 Galbaldy Beta. The RMS-117 Galbaldy Beta was developed from the Galbaldy Alpha, one of the few mobile suits that the Federation reprocessed from Xeon and continue its development instead of just repaint its color or some sort of mid-service life extension upgrade. The Galbaldy Alpha was developed by the Granada Arsenal because they are not sure if the Xeon High Command would end up adopting the Giang or HGUC. And even if they adopt one or the other, it might be too late for Granada to, produce and then ship everything back to Sci-Free proper. So what they choose to do is to develop the Galbaldy Alpha, where it have the maximum amount of the common parts in the unification maintenance program. And Federation, as Federation would be, take a really good liking on this logistic first design principle, since that's what they do themselves. So they continue the Galbaldy's Alpha's development into Galbaldy 2, into something that's probably unmistakably made by Xeon, but also pretty Federation as well. I'll be rating this kit based on Saga, style, action, gimmick, and absence. Style is how much does the kit resemble its counterparts in the anime, manga, games, or other media. The Galbaldy Beta here is actually quite new despite being from Zeta Gundam or Gundam Z. It didn't get a HGUC release until a few years ago. And as we will be looking into it later, I think we are in the phase where Bandai realized the original Okawara or animation's proportions are, well, one, actually looks good, and two, what people liked about these mobile suits. So it's actually pretty faithful to either, I would say, depending on the angle that you take the shots from, really. So let's take a closer look. Starting from the head, you can notice the mono eye. The grip sword is really the only time where Federation employs a lot of mono eye mobile suits and not afraid to hide them. Like even in 1 Year War, they are kind of wary about friendly fire between mono eye mobile suits and visor mobile suits. Not so much during the Grips War. And yeah, I painted the mono eye because it does have this cross sculpt in the middle of it. That is quite a signature of a lot of Grips War era mobile suits. And instead of darkening the rest of the presumably mono eye track, or in some depictions the area next to the mono eyes are reserved for other multi-spectrum sensors. Either way, I didn't paint it black because I do think the gray looks fine. It is not quite as striking as it would be if I blacken it, but it looks pretty good at the moment. Around the shoulders, we got quite a bit of sculpt. This part is built relatively modern, with the top part being one piece and then front like the chest and then the back being another one sandwiched together. So there's not a lot of noticeable gap beside the color separation. Back onto the head, the wrap part is one big tube basically that you slot on, and then the radiators are its own separate color pieces. So, and then of course the pulse transmission. So you really have to try, I don't think you can see it on the camera, to see the assembly gaps along the bottom. And then on the chest we got color separation for basically the cockpit, but Galbaldy Beta doesn't really open from the middle, even though this is practically where the cockpit really is. As you can see, it got the 3 segment, very much like Gang and HGUC. But unlike Gang and HGUC, Galbaldy Beta have a more angular skirt design. This is very Federation, and because the armor skirts are semi-consumables, it is understandable that the Federation changed it into a shape that they are more familiar with. Down to the lower legs, it is pretty much a Xeon design, just a bit more angular for the Federation's taste. Probably further increase the production efficiency, I presume. And we actually get not quite 5 lower leg thrusters. This thruster position is kind of common between Federation and Xeon by the end of 1 Year War, so it's hard to pin down what this is, where this is come from, but it works, so it stays. The obviously HGUC like lower leg provide a lot of room for the fuel tanks and the thrusters. Back of the skirts, pretty much like HGUC. It has thrusters on the back skirts, except they are now on the outside of the armor, presumably another Federation decision to improve maintenance over minor improved protection. Backpack, pretty Federations, with the new style square vents thrusters, and then the bobs and knobs that you would see on the GM Command or GM Co-District type. On this HG, it is 2 halves, presumably for other Galbaldy variants. And actually, the side piece, these hatches are also their own separate piece. But yeah, effectively it is a single non-movable piece affair. And yeah, nice detailed sculpt at the back of the torso. Kinda rare. I mean, most of the time they do exist, but you don't really get to see them. The arms of Galbaldy Beta is where it's really very much a hybrid of Federation and Xeon design. Obviously with the a bit more square design that is very Federation. Apogee motors on the side of the shoulder pads, both sides does that. And then we got some reinforced rib for the bicep. That is kinda new, but also Federation likes extra armor on the side of their bicep, so that's probably also Federation requests or preferences. And then the forearm, it is super square. That is definitely Federation, but the presumably auxiliary thrusters from HGUC is definitely a Xeon influence. I think the Federation keep that because they don't really have a preference for what kind of forearm module they want for the Galbaldy Beta. They are only in limited deployment among the Federation's own forces, not really Titans, at least at the beginning of the Grips War. So they presumably keep this for units that are good in close combat. So overall, while the color separations are not perfect, a lot of the part separation are actually pretty good. Let's go back to the arms for a second. They have separations among the natural sculpt of the forearm armor instead of right down the middle, and then the back of it, they have a separate piece to cover up the gaps. Every gap you see on the forearm is very natural. Shoulders, same deal, they are simple clamshell but have part separations in the natural gaps. Not so much for the backpack, but you don't really see this angle that much, so it is a reasonable sacrifice. And yeah, the legs, the front of the lower leg is separated on the side here. Again, very natural. And on the back, this is a somewhat natural part separation gap, so that's cool too. And the knee actually got this complex three parts where you got one on the left and right clamshell together, and then a big piece at the front for it. Not only because it is dark brown that, you know, the seam is hard to see, but you know, the front is the moneymaker, so this looks good. The thigh, pretty standard front back clamshell affair, so nothing wrong there. So yeah, overall color separation isn't the best, but it is effective enough. The ratio is good, part separation is good. If I have any complaint about assembly, it is that the forearm have this weird pin that go through it all the way for the joint, which is something that Bandai picked up in the middle of the Origin series, that I'm not sure why they're doing that. Well, I do have a theory as to why they do that, but why they do that on Galbaldy Beta, who doesn't have nearly as much excessive sculpt on, I am not sure. So yeah, aside from that, there's no complaint for the assembly and style in general, so it is a easy A for style. Next is action. Action isn't just the amount of the articulations, but also how useful those articulations are. And Galbaldy Beta, being a modern kit, benefits a lot. Having said that, the head is still on the forever double ball HG head joint. So, and because of its shape, it doesn't really look up a lot. Next is the ab crunch. Some people just think, or some people only have access or able to access the front of the ball of the torso. It is actually quite a bit of angle on its own, but there's actually a second hinge at the back of that ball that allow you to lift up the chest to bend backward. It's not as much as you might get forward, but in combination you can extend the middle of the chest quite a bit, and in combination you can create a giant gap like this for a really big waist bending. So yeah, if next time somebody tells you Galbaldy Beta doesn't have a lot of waist movement, yeah, tell them that. Actually, we'll keep this kinda in a different direction. Skirt is basically the classic double ball, except this time they are not cast together. You just cut them right off the sprue as usual. The side skirts are on a hinge, and it is on a peg too, so you do have a bit of play. And then the thigh connection, I guess, have a rocker, much like Scopedog. Again, contributing to much more dramatic appearing actions. Not quite as much as the side-to-side one, but still pretty dramatic. And then, thanks to the generous skirts, even with the giant knee pads, it can go all the way 90-degree forward. And we do have double knee joint. So it is a bit empty. That is point deduction, but hey, color separation for the presumably top of the leg intakes, but looks very good on the side. The foot is a ball joint and then have a pivot at the bottom of the leg. So yeah, forgot to mention the style. Detailed sculpt on the foot as usual, but we got a bit of hollow. Still not a big loss. We still get a 5 rotation as any modern kit would. And then the arm, we sort of play with it. Pretty modern, just a hinge for the shoulder pads and then a ball joint into the torso. What's different is it have the Zeta Revival Evolution type of extended shoulder blades, so kinda like Scopedog once again. So you can have Galbaldy Beta really extending his shoulder. Kinda weird that the top part of the bicep does not rotate, but on the elbow joint itself. But the elbow joint itself is a double joint, just not quite 90 with the armor interfering with each other. Oh, right. The gun stock can actually engage with the arm. I forgot about that. Let's do some gunfu fighting. Shouldn't be too hard with the up. Super easy, barely any inconvenience, as the large foot of Galbaldy Beta is very stable, and yeah, it can just kung fu fight super easily. And yeah, no action for the backpack, so that's a shame. But yeah, no, otherwise very good articulation overall. Maybe too good. Let's put that torso joint back down so that it doesn't overextend itself too much. So yeah, action, while not 100% super as good as the Gundam Revival or some of the modern kits where it can basically fold itself into a ball, Galbaldy Beta have plenty more enough action for your kung fu fighting needs. So easy as for action. Next is Gimmick. Gimmick are the onboard weapon, optional weapons, and other functionality of the mobile suit. We kinda have been talking around the beam rifle here. It is practically the same model of beam rifle as the HGUC, except the Federation flipped the optics to the side, presumably to differentiate them, maybe. This is around the time Federation also adopting simpler beam rifle designs as their own mobile suits are getting more power in general, so they probably doesn't need as much ECAP space as well. Also, there's a whole ECAP into magazine development going on, so all in all, I think they're trying to modularize the Xeon beam rifle design further, Like Xeon have a bit of modularity to their beam rifle, but that's obviously not as much as the Federation had already done, so they're probably trying to improve it. Either way, on this model, it means the stock can actually engage with like the chest bicep quite easily, and I'm sure if I play around a bit more I can get it up to the shoulder. But yeah, so I think the length is good. It is actually long enough for Galbaldy Beta to brace the beam rifle. That is nice. It is also not too large. That even with these bulges around Galbaldy Beta's forearm, it is stopping Galbaldy Beta from posing. And most importantly, the trigger finger hand actually have a bit of a offset to the side, so that the rifles are not wedging out the fingers. That's good. And then we got a standard hammer grip on the left hand here. You also got one for the right hand if you wanted to. And there are beam sabers on the table. You may be wondering, where does Galbaldy Beta store its beam saber? The answer is these raised pylons on the shoulder. There is not quite a hinge but a slot mechanism for you to open it up. And these beam saber hilts are actually full hilts. They are not full size. And this mechanism is supposed to be gray like the rest of the mechanisms, but you don't really see it most of the time, so it's okay, to be honest. Presumably, Galbaldy Beta open this up and either draw it across or, it eject the hilt a little bit forward for the hand to grab. But on the model kits, that's a bit hard to recreate, so we are just going to slot it on. If you have been paying attention, I have another accident. But this is a rare accident. Instead of the beam saber bending out of shape, it seems like the sprue have a bit too much plastic. That's why this one got too long and bent. But now it looks like Galbaldy Beta just pulled the sword out, or pulled the beam saber out. Despite being a hammer grip, it is actually slightly angled, so it's actually more a handshake grip when you put the beam saber on, so it's actually more like Galbaldy Beta is fighting with it. This is a cool shot too. So yeah, pretty standard affair. Beam saber blade, beam saber hilt. It is actually two-part beam saber hilt, but you can't really see it. And what we have been dodging the whole video, the shield of Galbaldy Beta. It does use a color correction sticker for the yellow bits, which I think is fine. You can probably see I didn't stick it quite correctly, but it looks okay. This is clearly another very Federation thing, with a retractive small buckler shield. And it uses the slots for arm attachment methods like the GM Sniper 2, interestingly enough. And here are the extra storage, presumably for things like missiles, grenades. Sometimes these are depicted as missile launchers themselves, but I believe here they are just generic storage. And if Galbaldy Beta have the new magazine type beam rifles, they can store those E-caps here. Anyways, you can attach the shield just like this, pretty secured. And they actually have a 3mm peg at the bottom, for the shield attachment. So you can turn the shield around whichever way you want. And to extend the shield, there's no extension mechanism, but you just have two positions for the front or the lower half of the shield to attach. So yeah, you can use the shield attachment to attach other 3mm option parts on Galbaldy Beta's forearm, or just bear the shield as intended. Let's put the saber back on. So yeah, a pretty standard Federation coffin shield design. A very Xeon looking mobile suit with a lot of Federation styling and fighting tactic. Pretty much coming to full circle from Jilgok trying to clone Gundam, and when we get to Galbaldy Beta, is pretty much a Gundam made with Xeon technology. Anyways, so Gimmick, everything Galbaldy Beta has is in the kit. No extra really, except for the extra hilt in storage mode on the shoulder, and a bit of the storage missile launcher at the shield and the extension gimmick, which you don't really see in the show if I remember correctly. Since nothing is missing, although nothing is particularly amazing, there are some provisions, but let's keep it an A for Gimmick. Last and certainly least for Galbaldy Beta is absence. Being only appear in Mobile Gundam Z for a few episodes, they do join in bigger battles later on. They don't really have a great impact on the Grips War overall, but you know, this kit had include everything already, and like I said a bit earlier, it has some provisions for other attachments, and yeah, the backpack is now updated to the standard 2-packs for the option parts backpacks. So there is a lot to love, or rather the Galbaldy Beta is a very good platform once again for you to start kit bashing, especially given this background. I think it is very good for that. Yeah, the stickers that I forgot to mention. I didn't use the eye, I just painted it instead. And I don't miss that they do not have the black and color correction for the rest of the visor or mono eye track. So, you know, I don't think anything is missing. But I don't think it provides very much either. So I'm just going to keep it an A. So, the verdict for the HGUC 1-144 RMS-117 Galbaldy Beta is A for style, S for action, A for gimmick, and A for absence. Overall, a very good rendition of the Galbaldy Beta. When I built this thing, I think this was designed quite early on, as it reminds me a lot of the early HGUC that I have been building. But at the same time, the engineering used is unmistakably modern, which I think makes this a really great kit overall. And I would be doing a kit bash somewhere down in the future, but that's another video. For now, I would say this kit also have some provisions for some later mobile suits that is based on the Galbaldy Beta or variants of. So I'm looking forward for Bandai to push those out. Hopefully they are not restricted to P Bandai, but we will have to wait and see. Thanks for watching. See you next time.